All right, welcome back to Big Country Politics. We have Dr. David Young with the AISD Superintendent. Thank you very much for being on the show. We appreciate you being here.
Happy to be here. Look forward to our visit.
We are in one AISD Center where the school board meets, and there was a meeting here last week about and first of all, we want to talk about the new building, the CTE building that's going to be built. We're going to talk about school security as well.
Okay.
I want to get to that building first of all.
Okay.
Came in a little over budget. Tell us a little bit about that.
So this is we call it the LIFT Center, Leadership and Innovation for Future Technologies.
Okay.
It will house our career and technical education programs, as well as Adams will be housed in this building, which Adams, as you know, is a standalone high school that's a STEM magnet. And so we were surprised on bid day. With all of our projects, we're seeing the effect of lots of growth and expansion in the state of Texas and in Abilene in general, and bids have come in high. With respect to this project, the bids were higher even than we've seen. And so our construction budget was around $35.7 million for this facility. And the numbers were between $6 and $7 million higher than that. And so the action that the board took at our meeting last night was to rank the bidders. We use a competitive sealed proposal process. Mm-hmm. We received 3 proposals from 3 different general contractors. And so we go through an evaluation process that is not just about price, but price is a significant, it's weighted 65%. The other is about their prior history of projects, references, and their financials to make sure that they can do a job of this magnitude. And we got 3 great contractors. It really did come down to price because all things were equal in that other 35% for these contractors. Mm-hmm. And so what you do is you rank the bidders in priority order. So we have a number 1 contractor, 2, and 3. And so all the board did last night, and what we will do now is they ranked the bidders and authorized the superintendent to negotiate a contract, not to execute a contract. And so what we will do now, you can't talk to the contractors about numbers until they've been ranked. And so we will start with the number 1 bidder. And we will have a conversation about were the bid documents clear? Are there clarifications that will affect price? Are there redesign elements that will affect price? We've identified about 8 different trades that we want to have a specific conversation about that we believe will impact that number dramatically. Then you move into the last phase is kind of looking, are there substitutions for finishes or materials that could, without sacrificing quality or scope, lower the price. And so we will begin that process with the highest ranked bidder, which if we get to the number that we want to get to, then we will have a contract to bring back to the board to approve. If you can't get there with number 1, you say, okay, we're done, we didn't get there, and then you go to number 2, and you have the same conversation. Once you have gone on to number 2, you can't go back to number 1. So
you go back to
right.
number 1. Okay.
And the procurement process, it has to be, you have to maintain the integrity of the process, right? They go through an exhaustive bid process and they give you their best number based on the bid documents. And so yes, you can only talk to number 1 at first. If you get to where you need to get, then you have a contract to bring back to the board to execute. That's the next step, is we will negotiate to a price and to a contract, and then we will bring it back to the board for approval, hopefully at their February 10th meeting. And so if you don't get there with number 1, you go to number 2, you try to get there with number 2. If you don't get there with number 2, you go to number 3. And there are only 3 in this instance. And so you may or may not get there with number 3. If you don't get there at number 3, then obviously you've exhausted the list of bidders. And so then you would be looking at rebidding the project, which would you wouldn't just rebid the same exact project. There would probably be some redesign elements and things. We are hopeful and confident that we're not going to get to that point. And my hope is that in this conversation with our top-ranked bidder, that we'll get this thing back within budget.
And when you're renegotiating numbers, what are you renegotiating? Are you sacrificing design elements in the building, sacrificing you know, maybe we don't build this wing, or what's that like?
Well, so you try to do it with things that are not going to negatively impact the student experience or the programming opportunities. So I'll just give an example. And Victor, I was a math teacher. I am not an engineer or a construction guy, okay? But you might look at the mechanical system in a project, and there might be one type of air conditioning system spec'd that is a quality product. However, we can accomplish the same goal with a different type of system that might not be as expensive to install. And so you just kind of go through every division of the bid documents and you're looking at those things. And so you might change this floor tile for that, and
that was my question.
And that would
those
save.
You're looking at.
Yeah, those are smaller increments, obviously, when you get down to finishes like tile or paint or whatever, versus changing out a significant system. But so the goal is not to cut classrooms, not to cut programs, but you do the things that honestly the general public, the students, the staff are not going to see that get us to that point.
Anything that we would do, like in our own house, if we're building a home and then we got to cut costs, those are the things we're going to look at. We're going to look at tile, we're going to look at stuff like that. So it's kind of the same deal. It sounds like a long process.
Yes, and it will take a little while, and we don't have a ton of time because we're trying to open this building in August of 2021. And so as long as we don't lose too much time here, we'll still be okay getting done on the timeline.
All right, and when we come back, I want to talk about school security, because we've had a couple of instances and a couple of campuses that we'll talk about as soon as we come back here on Big Country Politics. All right, welcome back to Big Country Politics. We're continuing our conversation with Dr. David Young, Superintendent of the Abilene ISD. We talked about the budget in our last segment with the new building, the LIFT program there. Now we want to talk about school security, because there's been a lot of concern about that. And I think my first question would be that there has been a lot of concentration on campuses from outside threats. What about those threats from within? I mean, it's not something that we hear about much.
Sure. So, you know, school safety, you've heard me say this before, Victor, we don't get to do anything else in a day before we think about keeping kids safe and staff safe. And so it's our primary goal each and every day. And so one of the best ways to accomplish that, certainly there are a lot of responsive physical things that we do, like police officers on campus, school marshals, security cameras, teachers on duty, stuff like that. But the very best way to ensure safety is to make sure that kids have ownership in their school and are willing to talk about things that come up and share and trust the people that the adults that are there with them. And so when we do get an indication that there might be a threat brewing from one student to another, from one student to an adult on campus, or that might affect the entire campus, we exhaustively investigate every single piece of information that comes to us like that. There aren't any instances where a student will come and report something, an adult will call and report something that we say, we don't think that's going to happen, we're not going to look into it. And it takes a ton of time, and some of them you have to. I was with a principal last week, just watching them deal with a situation, and it was called the one person back, and they said, well, no, I heard it from this person, and it's called in, and he made 4 different contacts before he really got to the person that was able to share information. And so we do that, and our administrators are trained in how to do those investigations. So internal threats are no different than external threats. We take them just as seriously. I would commend our students. They know that campus is their home away from home, and they are proud of it. They want to protect it, and I think we've done a good job of establishing relationships in a way that if something is brewing, we're going to hear about it. And so I just want people to be comfortable with knowing that's how we're going to respond, not just this time, but every time.
Well, and there's so many kids on all of these campuses. There's got to be something brewing all the times, I could imagine. And I guess one of the things that always comes out in when there's an incident is, okay, when do you guys contact parents?
Sure.
To let them know that there was an incident on campus? I mean, that's got to be a decision that, I mean, do you contact the parents for this thing? Don't you do it for this thing? It's got to be I guess it's a case by case deal, but it seems like
it is, and there are a lot of variables in play.
Yeah.
So certainly, who's involved in terms of the scope of a potential threat? When we know exactly what the threat is, who the threat was made against, I mean, we involve all of the appropriate parties. If it's one student threatening another student, we're going to communicate with the parents of the involved parties there, and that's not going to involve making a phone call to an entire campus or district full of parents. And the vast majority of what we deal with is kind of in the known category like that. And so we communicate with each of the involved parties. When it is a potential threat against an entire campus, then you are starting to think about, is it at all credible? Are we all, and so we're going to err on the side of notification. We've had several instances recently where we have gone ahead and notified that we're dealing with a threat, and we will typically ask for information to help us deal with that. And so that's kind of how we make that decision. The other variable that comes into play is, even when it's an issue that might not be one that we start down the road of needing to notify all parents, if we start to see a lot of misinformation, social media often exacerbates, and I would just encourage people, please get your information from actual people that are authorized to share.
Person social media, and that's how the rumor starts, right?
Some of that we see, and some of it we don't. Many of the threats we investigate are from social media, and so when we know there's an awful lot of misinformation out there, sometimes we will go ahead and make a broad communication to try to thwart that misinformation going forward. You guys, as media partners, are valuable for us in helping get accurate information out when there's misinformation that might be starting. And so that's kind of the decision-making process.
Well, and bringing up social media, my last question for you, because I know you got to go. What would you tell parents, students about, and you kind of already did, about social media and how rumors spread through that? I mean, this is kind of a new deal lately, right?
Well, certainly, and this has changed dramatically even from my time as a school administrator, Victor, is, there's at best very blurry lines between on-campus behavior and off-campus behavior, because something that gets said or taken the wrong way on social media, even at 10 o'clock at night, can have ramifications for how kids interact with each other on campus the next day. And so we as school administrators are now in this place of, you're running down those rabbit holes also in doing that investigation. And so but it supports kids, and it's helpful to families, and so we do it. So I would just say to parents and to kids, let's stick to, social media's got a lot of positive aspects. It's not the place for bullying or threats or there's no place for that. But certainly when it occurs through social media, that's difficult to deal with. And so I would encourage people to get their information from authorized sources rather than just blindly trusting something that they might have seen on social media, and to when appropriate, contact us and let us help make sure that the truth is known and facts are available.
So parents can always call the school district.
Sure.
Right. Dr. Young, thank you very much for being on the show.
We enjoyed it. Thank you, Victor.
All righty. We'll be back.